Naval Base Coronado held its breath. The conference room inside the JAG office was lit by a single overhead panel, its cold fluorescence reflecting off polished metal and glass. The only sound was the digital hiss of the video projector, followed by the faint, shaky audio from Rick Chen's own recording. Harper Hayes' face streaked with saltwater tears, body folded in on itself filled the screen. The camera shook slightly in the original footage. Rick's breathing had been uneven, excited, as he narrated his mockery. Now, standing at attention, he couldn't look at it. His gaze fixed on a point somewhere above the projection screen, unfocused and useless. His right eyelid twitched sharp, involuntary, a stress response he couldn't suppress. The muscles in his jaw were clamped tight enough that a small pulse throbbed along the line of his mandible. Commander Patricia Vance lifted the remote and paused the video. The freeze frame locked Harper's grief in place. Her shoulders collapsed inward, her hands searching blindly for spilled belongings, her mouth pressed into a thin, trembling line. A Marine who had held a radio together with shattered bone was reduced to this digital still. Petty Officer Chen, her voice was low, measured, the cadence of someone accustomed to issuing orders that carried legal weight. She waited until Rick's breathing hitched until he forced himself to meet her eyes. Do you understand why SEAL Team 3's entire squadron attended your preliminary hearing? He swallowed. The movement was small but visible. His Adam's apple rose and fell like a swallowed stone. Yes, ma'am. No, she said softly, leaning back in her chair. I don't believe you do. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Rick's posture faltered. He corrected himself immediately, shoulders snapping back into alignment, but the tremor running through his fingertips betrayed him. He was trying to hold on to something, discipline, maybe dignity, but it slipped with every breath. Look out the window, petty officer. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he turned his head. Outside, through the narrow pane of reinforced glass, the courtyard unfolded in disciplined silence. 33 SEALs stood in dress whites, unmoving, their formation a perfect rectangle of latent violence and absolute control, not ceremonial, not performative. Present, at their center stood Commander Marcus Hayes. The silver of his trident caught the morning light, throwing a sharp, deliberate glint across the courtyard like a warning reflected in steel. His hands were clasped behind him. His boots were locked in parade rest. His expression did not shift, not even as Rick's eyes met his through the glass. The stillness radiating from him was colder than any shouted rage would have been. Rick's breathing tightened. A shallow inhale, then another. He forced out words, voice fraying at the edges. Because I filmed. His throat constricted. I filmed Commander Hayes' sister, ma'am. The admission didn't relieve anything, it only thickened the air. Commander Vance folded her arms, not aggressive, but definitive. You filmed a decorated combat veteran at her lowest moment, a Marine who served with distinction. For TikTok engagement, she let the silence stretch. The overhead light hung faintly. Rick's eyes dropped to the polished floor. His reflection stared back at him. Uniform crisp, booth shine, posture crumbling from the inside. But before this becomes a federal case, Vance continued, her voice now clinical, you need context, you need clarity. Because to understand how Pooley destroyed his naval career before it even began. She tapped the remote. The lights dimmed. We need to go back 9 days. The screen went black, swallowing the room in quiet judgment. Morning sunlight cut through the windows of Anchor Diner in Lawn. Clean lines, catching dust motes in slow drift. Harper Hayes moved through the space with the deliberate efficiency of someone who had learned the cost of wasted motion. Every step was measured. Her left leg carried a faint hitch, the kind that only appeared when the ambient pain spiked. Under the denim, scar tissue pulled in patterns she never talked about. She wiped down the last table, wrist rotating with practiced precision, eyes scanning the room the way Marines never quite stop doing, corners, exits, potential disturbances. Outside, across the 2-lane road, the door of the Navy Dep office swung open. 4 Poolies stepped out into the brightness, blinking like they'd come from a bunker. Their uniforms were civilian hoodies, sneakers, untested bravado, but the manila folders under their arms marked them as property of the United States Navy in the making. 10 days from accessing, 10 days from losing the right to casual stupidity. Rick Chen walked at the front, phone already lifted, red recording light reflected in his sunglasses. The device was practically grafted to his hand. His recruiter had lectured them for 40 minutes about conduct, represent the Navy, stay clean, ship without incident. Rick had nodded through all of it, but the moment the door closed behind them, discipline evaporated like sweat on asphalt. "Day 47 of waiting to become a sailor," he said, angling the camera toward himself before flipping it outward in a sweeping pan of the street. "Let's see who we can roast today." His voice carried the brittle confidence of someone who had never been punched by consequences. Mason, Derek, and Tyler trailed behind him, was still shaped by high school lockers and cafeteria hierarchies, not yet by chain of command logic. Mason's shoulders were too tight, his mouth pulling into a half-grimace each time Rick said something borderline. Tyler kept checking the dep office door as if expecting Martinez to appear and drag them back. Derek laughed too loudly, the kind of laugh that masked the fear of not fitting in. They crossed the street in a loose cluster and entered Anchor Diner, the bell over the door giving a soft metallic chime. Harper straightened automatically at the sound, menus already in hand. She approached with the neutral expression of someone who had dealt with every flavor of human behavior and learned to deflect most of it. Her eyes flicked over the Bo's quick threat assessment, a veterancy she didn't broadcast but couldn't switch off. Their patches, half hidden under their folders, marked them as poolies, babies, not even in the fleet yet. Rick's phone was up before she reached the table. He didn't ask permission, didn't lower the lens. He went for the first angle of humiliation he could weaponize. "Yo," he said, camera locking onto her face, "do they make you test the food quality? 'Cause it's working." A moment of silence followed, stretched thin. Mason's laugh sputtered out of him in a nervous burst. Derek smacked his arm, urging him to keep it together. Tyler swallowed hard, eyes darting to Harper, then to the phone, then away. Harper didn't flinch, not visibly, but her breath paused for half a second, one clipped, controlled inhale. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her notepad, knuckles shifting white before she deliberately relaxed them. She set the menus on the table with military precision, no wasted motion, no visible reaction. "Whenever you're ready," she said quietly. Pen posed. Rick kept filming, angling his phone lower to catch her full frame like she was an exhibit. He whispered something to the camera, something low, meant for later editing, and snickered. Harper wrote down their orders without lifting her gaze. Every line she drew was steady, not a quiver, not a crack. But the microtension in her shoulders betrayed the old instinct to brace. Behind the counter, Chief Petty Officer Raymond Cole paused in mid-polish of a coffee pot. The muscles along his jaw tightened, the left side twitching, once a habit from years of standing inspection ready. His eyes narrowed, picking up more detail into seconds than the poolies ever would. He saw the limp Harper tried to hide. He saw the unit patch on the Bo's folders. He knew every recruiter within 20 miles. And he saw Rick's phone lifted like a weapon made of glass and arrogance. Cole placed the pot down with deliberate care, the rubber base meeting the counter in a soft click that resonated louder than a shout would have. He didn't step forward yet, he didn't intervene. He simply watched, tracking their body language like radar, waiting to determine if this was immaturity or something that would require a more formal correction. Harper collected the menus, turned without comment, and moved toward the kitchen window. Her left leg caught slightly as she pivoted. She masked it by shifting her weight early, an old trick, smooth, practiced, nearly invisible. Rick caught it on camera. Harper didn't see the small, satisfied smirk flicker across his face as he saved the clip. By Wednesday afternoon, the routine had calcified into something ritualistic, predatory, predictable. The bell at the diner door chimed, and Harper didn't need to turn to know who it was. The cadence of their footsteps had imprinted itself in her auditory memory, for sets, and even confidence, the scrape of cheap sneakers, the muted thud of Rick's heavier stride. His phone was already raised, it always was. The daily videos had taken on a momentum of their own. Comments flooded in, strangers laughing at a woman they'd never met, judging a life they didn't understand. Tags like #NavyHumor and #Bootcamp ready flashed across Rick's edits, each clip crafted to turn Harper into a caricature, a spectacle. Harper didn't watch any of them, but she felt the shift in the diner. New customers recognizing her, a few whispering. The slow burn of shame she refused to show. Rick paused just inside the doorway, framing his shot with the casual expertise of someone who had spent more hours filming than training for the service he claimed to represent. His expression sharpened when he spotted her. He nudged Mason and tilted his head toward Harper, signaling the start of their afternoon entertainment. Harper was at the counter, checking order receipts. Her shoulders were set with the quiet rigidity of someone bracing for impact, not fear, but fatigue. Her left leg ached from the morning rush, the limp slightly more pronounced after 2 hours on her feet. She shifted her stance to distribute the pressure, subtle, practiced. She refused to give them anything that looked like weakness. Rick cleared his throat, theatrically loud. "Bet you can't balance 4 plates at once, Harper." His voice carried that brittle bravado, pitched so the entire diner could hear. "Or do physics work different at your weight class?" Mason's laugh came first, thin, high, the sound of guilt trying to hide behind group loyalty. Derek looked away, Tyler's jaw clenched, a tiny muscle jumping near his ear, but he didn't intervene. They were too young, too eager to belong, too afraid to confront the one with the phone. Harper didn't look at any of them, she didn't flinch. Her breath paused, barely perceptible, then resumed with iron control. She didn't rise to insults anymore, not after Afghanistan, not after learning what real danger felt like. A bow with a camera didn't qualify. She turned toward the kitchen pass-through window. For entree plates, heavy ceramic, fully loaded, waited for delivery. She slid her hands beneath two, palm steady. Then she lifted the third onto her left forearm, balancing it at a precise angle. The fourth she caught with the crook of her right thumb and forefinger, distributing the weight along muscle memory that had once carried ammo cans and weapon systems under fire. Her shoulders aligned, her core tightened. Her gait shifted into that controlled, gliding movement born from battlefield logistics, moving equipment quickly, quietly, cleanly, even with rounds snapping overhead. She walked the length of the dining room, every step exact, not a wobble, not a tremor. The plates rested against her like extensions of her own body. The table she approached held 3 Navy Chief Petty Officers, their khaki uniforms crisp, rank insignias polished to mirror sheen. They looked up as she approached, their eyes flicking not at the plates, not at the food, but at the quiet mastery in her posture. They offered nods of acknowledgement that most civilians would have missed, but Harper caught them. A warrior salute, subtle and respectful. Behind her, Rick lowered his phone slightly, fingers tightening around the device. A shadow of irritation crossed his expression. His content had just been overshadowed by competence. Mason's laughter died mid-breath. Harper returned to the counter, shoulders steady, breathing controlled. She didn't look at the poolies, she didn't need to. In the back office, Chief Cole closed the door behind him. The latch clicking into place sounded louder than it should have. Final, resolute, he dialed a number he knew by heart. The line picked up on the first ring. "Marcus." "It's Ray." He leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly through his nose. His eyes drifted toward the doorway, toward Harper moving through the diner with that silent dignity that only combat veterans carried. "We've got a situation with your sister." He paused just long enough for the tension on the other end to spike. "No, she's fine. But there's a poolie who needs a reality check before he ships." Across the base at Naval Special Warfare Center, Commander Marcus Hayes froze mid-movement. The training schedule in his hand rustled as his grip tightened. His jaw flexed, one small, controlled, the kind of reaction that came from a man who prided himself on staying composed, but whose protective instinct ignited instantly where his sister was concerned. "Copy that, Chief," he said, voice low, steady. "I'll handle it." The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed softly, a low, persistent hum beneath the clatter of dishes and conversation. Friday evening had arrived in waves, bringing the first heavy swell of the dinner rush. The floor vibrated with footsteps, rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the staccato rhythm of an environment primed for chaos. Harper Hayes moved through it like a conductor, each motion efficient, economy perfected over years in motor transport operations. She felt the familiar ache in her left leg, a reminder of old injuries, but it did not slow her. Every step was measured, every pivot calculated. A table near the window drew her attention immediately. 6 young men, dressed in sweat-stained civilian clothing, bore the fatigued postures of men fresh from the crucible of basic underwater demolition, SEAL Butt, training. Their shoulders sagged, eyes half-lidded, faces pale and streaked with the subtle grime of relentless exertion. Harper recognized the look, respectful vigilance, alert yet depleted, the kind cultivated under constant stress as sleep deprivation. She didn't wait to be asked. She slid around the table with a pitcher of water, filling glasses methodically, wrists rotated to avoid strain, elbows tucked close, movement devoid of flourish. One candidate, exhaustion pressing at the edge of his awareness, misjudged the coffee pot on his table. The heavy ceramic slipped, tumbling in slow motion. Liquid bowled and hissed as it met the floor, shards scattering. The scent of scorched coffee hung briefly in the air. Harper's body reacted before her mind fully registered the event. A swift kick directed a towel beneath the flow, creating an improvised dam. She gestured with a flick of her wrist, steering patrons away from the hazard, her eyes scanning for potential collisions. Hands moved in choreography. Another towel, repositioned. A chair shifted. The broken ceramic cleared. 90 seconds later, the floor gleamed once more, clean and safe, as if the incident had never occurred. No panic escaped her. No dramatics. The precision of her movements mirrored the drills she had executed in Helmand, where equipment, wounded personnel, and mission success depended on calm, methodical efficiency. Her shoulders were square, breath controlled, muscles taut but relaxed in cyclical tension release. The bud, as candidates watched, slack-jawed and silent. One leaned forward, whispering to his neighbor, voice barely audible. That was tactical. Across the room, Rick Chen's phone was raised, capturing every second. His grin was sharp, predatory, intended for the camera. When your shift ends and the buffet opens, his words trailed, an attempt at derision, but his confidence faltered slightly as Harper's efficiency undercut the mockery. He caught himself, adjusted the lens. The senior candidate at the window had risen. Towering 6'2", his frame cold with solid musculature honed through Hell Week's unforgiving drills, every sinew visible beneath a damp t-shirt. He moved deliberately, each step heavy but controlled, approaching Rick with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to extracting compliance without violence. "Delete that," he said, voice slow, measured, carrying the weight of unspoken consequence. Rick laughed, tilting his head back slightly, but the twitch at the corner of his left eye betrayed the brief crack in his composure. "Or what, tadpole, you gonna wash out on me?" The candidate did not respond verbally. His eyes held Rick's in a fixed, unyielding stare, the kind earned only through 120 hours of continuous training, sleep deprivation, stress inoculation, and confrontation with real danger. It was the language of experience, of silent command, of a presence that demanded immediate recalibration. Mason's hand twitched near his phone. Tarek's gaze dropped, suddenly captivated by the smooth curve of the tabletop, the grain in the wood, anything to avoid the pressure of that observation. Tyler, closer to the window, leaned slightly forward, fists unclenched but knuckles white. Rick's smirk faltered as the weight of that unspoken authority settled around him. The camera in his hand wobbled, and a subtle exhale escaped through the tension in his chest. Harper had already returned to the counter, wiping the table with the meticulous precision of someone for whom each motion carried consequence. She didn't look at Rick. She didn't acknowledge him. Her focus remained absolute. The work in front of her, the space she controlled, the standards she embodied. The diner was momentarily silent, the quiet threaded with the residual tension of authority, competence, and unflinching professionalism. The Bud's candidate returned to his seat, and the others followed, still exchanging glances that communicated respect, awe, and the silent understanding that Harper Hayes was not simply a waitress. She was a professional who had survived, who had executed under pressure, and whose presence conveyed lessons Rick had yet to learn. Harper stepped out of Anchor Diner into the cool night air, the neon signage casting fractured light across the sidewalk. 12 hours of standing had left her legs stiff, every step a calculated adjustment to compensate for the pressured building beneath her prosthetic liner. The residual damage from Helmand, a subtle, the persistent reminder of the convoys, the IEDs, the long stretches of dust-choked heat manifested as a raw rubble on her femur. She breathed shallowly, each inhale measured, as she shifted weight from her left leg to her right, trying to manage the persistent throb. Her knee gave an involuntary twitch. Micro-adjustments failed. The joint folded under her suddenly, and she hit the concrete with a heavy thud. The sound was hollow, echoed briefly off the nearby buildings. Her bag swung from her shoulder, spilling its contents across the pavement. Keys glinted under the streetlights, her wallet lay askew, and the folded flag from her retirement ceremony came to rest at her side like a silent witness. A photo slipped from the bag, the image of her and Marcus in dress blues, faces composed but eyes alive with the unspoken bond forged in shared sacrifice. Harper sat there for a moment, legs splayed, hands trembling as she gathered herself. Her breath came shallow and uneven, chest rising and falling against the backdrop of urban quiet. Her hands fisted momentarily, nails pressing into her palms, before she let them rest limply on the concrete. Tears slid down her cheeks, unbidden. Not from the fall, but from everything she carried, the injuries invisible to the untrained eye, the career she had poured herself into and was forced to leave behind, the isolation inherent in her service. Her lips parted slightly, drawing in small, ragged breaths, and a subtle tremor ran through her jaw. Across the street, Rick Chen's phone was already recording. The glow of the screen illuminated his smirk as he zoomed in, capturing the close-up of her tear-streaked face. "Yo, chat, we've got a live one," he said, voice high with the thin veneer of confidence. "This is what happens when you skip leg day for a decade." The words were flippant, careless, spoken without hesitation. His eyes darted between Harper and his friends, Mason, Derek, and Tyler, who mirrored his excitement in quieter, uncertain ways. Mason swallowed audibly, voice catching, "Dude, that's fucked up." Rick ignored him. "It's content, bro. This is gonna hit 100,000 views." His hand shifted slightly, adjusting the camera angle, catching the raw vulnerability he assumed was weakness. Laughter followed, a sharp, brittle sound that briefly clashed with the hum of distant traffic. Harper's vision blurred with tears, but she kept her attention narrow, gathering the scattered contents of her bag. Her movements were deliberate, hands steady despite the fatigue radiating through every limb. Keys slid back into her pocket, the wallet tucked against her torso, the flag folded with precision born from habit. Each motion was a micro-expression of control, wrists rotated carefully, shoulders square, torso balanced against the tremor of exhaustion. Rick did not notice the subtle shift in the air across the lot. 3 vehicles arrived, moving with a silent, calculated efficiency that spoke of operational training beyond the civilian imagination. Their matte black tactical exteriors reflected the streetlights in fractured shards. The lead vehicle, an SUV with discrete NSW Group 1 markings, slowed to a measured stop. In the driver's seat sat the Bud.'s candidate from Friday, the one whose eyes had communicated silent authority. A call had been made moments earlier. This was the response. The other 2 vehicles followed with precision, engines muted but present. Harper remained unaware of them, focused solely on the remnants of her shift and the pain radiating through her knee. Rick, still filming, did not see the subtle glint of professionalism in the occupants of the SUVs, the practiced awareness, the scanning of potential threats, the coordination in movement that required no verbal commands. The Bud.'s candidate's posture behind the wheel was tight, controlled, each movement deliberate, a low-level hum of operational readiness. Mason, Derek, and Tyler shifted nervously, drawn by the presence of the vehicles, the incongruity of authority intruding on their petty mischief. Rick, however, remained caught in his own spectacle, oblivious to the gathering forces. His phone captured only what he wanted to see: the perceived failure, the vulnerability, the human he thought was a subject rather than a person. On the sidewalk, Harper adjusted the bag strap over her shoulder, drawing in a slow, measured breath. Her jaw flexed once, a tiny tick at the corner of her mouth betraying the exhaustion and the frustration of carrying unseen burdens. She rose slowly, careful of her knee, unaware that the calculus of accountability, authority, and consequence was converging across the street in real time. The night air carried the faint scent of salt and gasoline, the horizon fading into muted indigo as streetlights reflected off the pavement. The diner door swung open in unison, the small bell above echoing a signal almost ritualistic in its timing. 33 men emerged, each wearing NSW ball caps, civilian attire chosen for discretion yet tailored in cut and fit to allow unrestricted movement. They flowed out with identical precision, steps measured, shoulders square, head scanning the perimeter with the practiced sweep of operators who understood that awareness was a weapon as sharp as any blade or firearm. Off-duty, yet fully operational, the mantra unspoken but evident in posture and motion. They spread methodically, forming a loose perimeter around Harper, eyes sweeping the lot, bodies subtly adjusting to maintain coverage angles. No verbal commands, no drawn weapons, no theatrics. Their mere presence carried authority, calibrated and absolute. Every movement communicated discipline, cohesion, and readiness. Harper, still hunched slightly from the fall and the ache in her knee, sensed the shift in energy before she saw them fully. Her hand went to her bag instinctively, checking straps and the position of her belongings, micro-adjustments executed without hesitation. Marcus Hayes moved through the small cluster with economy, each step purposeful, yet silent, the long shadow of authority preceding him. At 6'3", he descended to his sister's level, knees bending smoothly, weight center, eyes locked on hers with controlled intensity. "Harper, I've got you," he said, voice low, modulated. No rush, no panic, only precision and care. Harper looked up, eyes red, fingers brushing the remaining tears from her cheeks. "Marcus, I'm fine." "You didn't need to." Her voice was soft, breath shallow, yet the tremor at the corner of her jaw betrayed the residue of pain, fatigue, and pride. "Yes, I did." His hands gripped her forearms, steady and unyielding, and lifted her to her feet. In the same motion, he retrieved her bag, checking the contents with trained eyes, noticing the folded flag and photo but not speaking. Attention to detail was reflex, ingrained through operational necessity. Harper exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders drop fractionally, recalibrating balance over her prosthetic limb. Across the street, Rick Chen's phone wavered in his grip, the smirk draining from his face. His knuckles whitened as his hands tightened around the device, eyes wide, pupils dilated. Who are these guys?" He whispered, the bravado of minutes before evaporated under the weight of presence he could not name, could not categorize. A senior chief petty officer stepped forward from the perimeter. Age lined his face, a roadmap of 2 decades in combat etched into every crevice. Eyes sharp, movements economical, every breath measured. His voice was calm but authoritative, resonant with the weight of experience. "You're Rick Chen, Pooley, Dep Under Petty Officer Martinez." "Shit date in 2 days." Rick's jaw dropped slightly, mouth dry. Swallowing produced a faint rasp. How do you know that?" His left eyelid twitched, a minor tick betraying adrenal surge. "Your recruiter is my former student," the senior chief said, voice steady. No hint of threat, only fact. "He called me 10 minutes ago. Said you've been filming people without consent, harassing civilians." Misrepresenting the Navy. Marcus rose to full height, shoulders broad, chest relaxed but cold in latent strength. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. Authority was present in the straight line of his spine, the controlled tilt of his chin, the weight of his gaze. "That woman you filmed is Harper Hayes, former Marine, combat veteran, my sister. And you just committed a violation of her privacy for social media clout." The other SEALs shifted subtly, moving as a single organism. The circle tightened not in threat, not in anger but with a precise, nonverbal communication of containment, operational control, and accountability. Each micro-step reinforced the cohesion of the group. Every head tilt, foot placement, and shoulder adjustment calculated to assert dominance without a word. They were silent, yet their coordination spoke volumes. The air between Rick and the operators pulsed with an unspoken lesson. Discipline, respect, and consequence existed independently of volume or spectacle. Rick's chest rose and fell rapidly, shallow, uneven breaths betraying the adrenaline spike, his hands still gripping the phone, knuckles pale. The world he thought he controlled, the one behind the lens, had vanished. His eyes flicked between Marcus and the senior chief, between Harper and the remaining 31 operators, scanning for some escape, some loophole, some joke he could still leverage. There was none. Only the absolute presence of trained warriors, and the full measure of the accountability he had provoked. Harper, adjusting her bag on her shoulder once more, stood straight, every micro-movement controlled, wrist flicking to close a strap, head tilting to assess, eyes forward but aware. She drew a slow breath, the tremor at her jaw gone. replaced by quiet composure, a practiced readiness that spoke louder than any words. Marcus placed a hand lightly on her back, grounding, protective, a silent affirmation. She was seen, recognized, and no longer alone in the shadows of her sacrifices. Marcus's hand moved with deliberate precision as he retrieved his phone from the inside pocket of his jacket. The device was sleek, unassuming, yet in his grip it became a tool of undeniable authority. He swiped with practiced efficiency, not for social media, not for spectacle, but to present unassailable documentation. The screen illuminated in the dim streetlight, reflecting faintly in Rick Chen's wide eyes. Each image, each document, carried weight. Each bite of evidence was a microcosm of sacrifice, discipline, and the unforgiving calculus of military service. Harper Hayes, motor transport operator, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. Marcus began, his tone level, measured, deliberate. Deployed Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2018. Convo hit by IED. She stayed on the radio for 47 minutes with a shattered femur, directing medevac while under sporadic fire. 3 Marines lived because she didn't panic. His eyes locked on Rick's, unwavering, conveying the magnitude of the facts without flourish, letting the numbers, the minutes, the decisions under fire speak louder than any intonation. He swiped again. The photos displayed Harper in uniform. Younger, whole, her posture straight, eyes focused with the calm intensity of a trained operator. Another image, the Commendation Medal citation, text crisp, the language formal, a record of valor beyond ordinary measure. Discharge paperwork followed, marked clearly, honorable, medical retirement. Each piece of documentation landed like a calculated blow, dismantling the assumptions Rick had built his jest upon. Derek's gaze lingered on Harper, his eyes widened imperceptibly, the corners twitching, pupils dilating as comprehension registered. "You're a veteran." The word was barely above a whisper, edged with disbelief and dawning respect. Harper met his gaze, shoulders squared despite the residual aches, jaw flexing minutely. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of authority, of lived experience. "I was a Marine. Now I'm a waitress you decided to mock for entertainment." Each syllable articulated with precision, the cadence measure, deliberate, a lesson in accountability disguised as quiet fact. Her eyes flicked briefly to Rick, narrowing fractionally, a micro-expression of contained judgment. The senior chief shifted slightly, stepping forward, face lined with the geography of decades in combat zones, hands relaxed but posed at his sides. His voice was low, controlled, carrying procedural authority and the subtle weight of institutional memory. "Chen, you understand the delayed entry program isn't a free pass, right? You remain under Navy authority. Your recruiter can terminate your participation at any time for conduct unbecoming." His gaze swept the space between Rick and the assembled operators, the statement absolute, unyielding, a legal and procedural line drawn clearly and irrevocably. Rick's face drained of color, lips parting slightly, a shallow swallow punctuating the sudden constriction in his throat. He raised his hand, only to let it drop limply to his side, a micro-movement betraying the surge of adrenaline. I didn't know she was." Marcus tilted his head fractionally, eyes narrowing, every micro-muscle in his jaw flexing subtly, hands still gripping Harper's bag in one, phone in the other. His voice remained steady, measured, clinical in its precision. Would it have mattered? The pause stretched, calibrated. If she were just a civilian waitress, would her dignity have mattered less? The words were not rhetorical, they were the imprint of command authority delivered in controlled resonance, piercing the space between ego and consequence. Silence descended, heavy, charged, a thick pause waited with accountability. The night seemed to contract around the scene, streetlights cast in long, angular shadows. Rick's breathing became uneven, shallow, hands tightening into fists at his sides, knuckles blanching. Derek, Mason, and Tyler remained mute, eyes darting between Harper and Marcus, internalizing lessons far beyond their years, beyond the superficial thrill of mockery. Harper adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder, subtle rotation of the wrist, a micro-movement conveying readiness, control, and endurance. Marcus's hand brushed briefly against her back, a grounding gesture, imperceptible yet loaded with protective authority. The senior chief watched Rick, eyes scanning for micro-expressions, signs of evasiveness, nonverbal cues of acknowledgement. The perimeter of SEALs remained, posture calibrated, breathing measured, a silent reinforcement of consequence. Rick's gaze fell to the pavement. The laughter, the bravado, the superficial performance dissolved in the presence of cold fact, lived experience, and coordinated authority. The images on the screen, the meticulous recounting of Harper's valor, the procedural weight of the senior chief's words all converged into a quiet, inescapable truth. Actions have consequence, and respect is not optional. The morning light filtered through the slatted blinds of the Naval Recruiting District conference room, painting the room in stark stripes of shadow and illumination. Rick Chen sat rigid, hands resting on the polished surface of the table, though they did not stay still. Fingers flexed and unflexed, tapping minutely against the tabletop, wrists turning, a subtle, nervous rhythm betraying the facade of composure he tried to maintain. Across from him, Petty Officer Martinez's shoulders slumped slightly, eyes narrowing with the fatigue of someone carrying responsibility for another's failure. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, no relation, observed quietly, pen poised, every micro-expression calibrated to assess not to lecture, but to measure compliance, understanding, and contrition. A Navy JAG officer sat adjacent, posture rigid, hands folded precisely, a repository of statutory authority and procedural consequence. On the screen, the video played. Rick's own laughter, high-pitched and brash, filled the room with a harsh, discordant echo. Harper Hayes sat on the sidewalk, her face streaked with tears, hands clenching the concrete as if to anchor herself. Each frame of the footage carried more weight than the last. Rick's eyes tracked himself, watching each careless inflection, each mockery. He thought clever, and felt a tightening in his chest as the gravity of his actions crystallized. His lips parted slightly, jaw tense, eyelids flickering in rapid succession, subtle micro-tremors betraying the adrenal spike coursing through him. Lieutenant Commander Chen's voice broke the silence, even, precise, every word chosen for clarity and authority. Pu Chen, you violated several delay entry program rules, unauthorized filming, harassment, conduct unbecoming. But more importantly, you violated the core values we expect from sailors: honor, courage, commitment. The weight of the words lingered, the cadence measured, carrying both professional reprimand and moral clarity. Rick's chest rose and fell unevenly, a shallow inhale followed by a tight exhale, hands clenching briefly before slackening, knuckles blanching. Martinez's tone, rougher and fatigued, edged into the room. I vouch for you, Rick. I told Commander Hayes you were salvageable. Was I wrong? His voice did not rise, but the exhaustion beneath it resonated, a subtle accusation carried within a statement of fact. Rick's eyes darted, searching for any sign of reprieve, a loophole, a defense that might mitigate the burgeoning weight pressing on him. It was a joke, he began, voice quavering, the words spilling out faster than intended. I didn't mean, the JAG officer's voice interjected crisply, cutting the air with procedural authority. California Penal Code 647J1 makes it illegal to film someone in a state of distress without consent for purposes of harassment. Ms. Hayes could press charges. Commander Hayes has requested we handle this internally through military discipline. The words landed with absolute precision, formal, unyielding, punctuating the consequences with legal and institutional finality. Rick's hands shook visibly now, the tremor traveling from the fingers to his wrists, even up into his forearms. He swallowed hard, jaw tight, eyes flicking from the screen to Lieutenant Commander Chen, then to Martinez, then to the JAG officer. What does that mean? His voice was almost inaudible, laced with the panic of someone facing irreversible consequence for the first time. Lieutenant Commander Chen slid a document across the table, the movement deliberate, measured, authoritative. The paper landed with a soft, final thud. Option 1, she said, voice even, precise, we drop you from DEP, you never become a sailor. Option 2, you accept non-judicial punishment under Article 15 authority, complete a rehabilitation program, and ship to basic training 3 months late under probationary status. Any infraction during training results in an immediate discharge. The words hung in the air, heavy, deliberate, slicing the room into two discrete paths, each unalterable once chosen. Rick's gaze fixed on the document. The edges blurred slightly as the adrenaline surge, Pupils dilated, lips pressed together as he processed the magnitude. His chest tightened, ribs expanding shallowly with uneven breaths, each inhale reluctant. Hands flexed, fists clenched and unclenched, a micro-movement of desperation and contemplation. The future, previously linear and assured, now split sharply into two paths, one terminating in rejection, the other in painstaking remediation under the strictest scrutiny. The decision was not simply procedural, it was existential, a reflection of character under immediate judgment by the systems of authority he had violated. Silence filled the room, each second drawn out, carrying the weight of accountability, authority, and impending consequence. Rick's micro-expressions, a subtle tick in his left eyelid, the shifting of weight in his chair, the shallow catch of breath revealed the internal calculus as he grappled with the enormity of choice and responsibility. Rick Chen's choice was made with the kind of gravity that presses on the chest and lingers long after the decision itself. He had elected the path of rehabilitation under Article 15 authority, agreeing to a probationary, delayed entry that would test both his endurance and his integrity. The next 3 months unfolded with a rhythm that was both punishing and formative. Each Saturday morning, he reported to the VA Medical Center in San Diego, the uniform of a pulley replaced by a plain navy t-shirt and trousers. The clinical scent of antiseptic hung thickly in the hallways, mixing with the faint metallic tang of wheelchair brakes and the subtle musk of human effort and endurance. His assignments were precise and repetitive, pushing wheelchairs along polished corridors, ensuring patients reached therapy rooms on schedule, and adjusting footrests and harnesses with exacting attention. Each motion required both physical control and situational awareness. A missed cue could cause pain or humiliation to someone already vulnerable. Rick's hands, once used for holding a camera and crafting content, were now instruments of careful service. Knuckles occasionally whitened as he gripped the rims of chairs or steadied elderly veterans who flinched at sudden movements. He sat with men whose experiences dwarfed his own in terms of trauma and endurance. One former SEAL, TBI evident in the hesitation and disorientation of his speech, repeatedly failed to recall his daughter's name, the frustration visible in subtle twitches around his jaw and flickers of eyes that darted away to avoid the shame of repetition. Another Marine flinched at the abruptness of passing car horns during a therapy walk, shoulders rising minutely, fists tightening for a fraction of a second, the nervous tic betraying months of hypervigilance ingrained by combat. A Coast Guard veteran recounted rescues, 23 lives saved in a single mission, yet could not maintain employment due to the unyielding grip of PTSD. Rick listened without commentary, absorbing the weight of each story, recognizing the resilience required to endure trauma that left no room for performative bravado. Amid the regimented chaos, Harper Hayes appeared consistently, her presence measured, professional, unassuming yet undeniably authoritative. Every Saturday, she led vision-impaired veterans through reading exercises, her voice steady, clear, each syllable articulating instruction with the precision of someone trained to guide under stress. She also assisted with physical therapy, demonstrating adaptive techniques, gait corrections, and the proper use of prosthetic limbs. Rick watched, at first with detached observation, then with growing awareness of the rigor and empathy intertwined in her movements. One session stood out. Harper was working with a retired master sergeant, guiding him along parallel bars, her hands brushing briefly against his back to stabilize posture. Her own prosthetic leg, stressed after hours of standing and walking, forced a visible limp, subtle but undeniable. Her eyes, calm and measured, tracked his movements with the precision of a battlefield medic, issuing corrections not as critique, but as technical adjustments grounded in operational knowledge. Each step was deliberate, controlled, and imparted without condescension. During a scheduled break, Rick approached, breath caught in his chest, jaw set tighter than usual. "Miss Hayes, His words falter under the weight of accumulated guilt and the silent judgment present in her posture. Harper raised a hand, palm outward, the gesture slight, measured. "If you're about to apologize to make yourself feel better, don't." Her voice carried authority, neutrality, a clear boundary delineated without overt emotion, yet heavy with expectation. Rick exhaled, shallow, feeling the constriction in his diaphragm loosen marginally. "I was going to say, I'm sorry, not for me, for you. You deserved better than what I did," he said, voice restrained, careful, the cadence deliberate to convey sincerity without theatrics. Harper studied him, her gaze evaluating micro-expressions, subtle shifts in posture, the tightening and release of his jaw, the twitch of his eyelid, all data points revealing intent and reflection. "What you did was cruel," she said softly. "Measured. What you do next is who you are." She turned and walked away, each step deliberate, her limp a visible testament to resilience rather than weakness. There was no forgiveness offered, no absolution granted. The standard was clear: actions, not words, would define character henceforth. Rick remained standing, absorbing the quiet authority in her retreating figure, the unspoken mandate resonating deeper than any reprimand, any legal consequence, or public shaming he had endured. The lesson was elemental. Integrity required proof, delivered through relentless, consistent action, under scrutiny, without the comfort of immediate validation. 3 months later, the flat gray skies over Recruit Training Command, Great Lakes, Illinois, seemed incongruous with the heat radiating from the drill field. Rick Chen stood among his fellow recruits, shoulders square, spine straight, not rigid, but measured, an awareness of the uniform now woven into the subtle cadence of his posture. His boots scuffed the concrete with a muted rhythm, each step deliberate, the sound subdued yet authoritative. He had passed basic training. Not honor graduate, not distinguished, just passed. But the significance lay not in accolades, but in endurance, accountability, and transformation under scrutiny. The graduation ceremony unfolded with the precision of a military chronometer. Flags fluttered lightly, ceremony rifles rested at exact angles in silent salute, the rhythm of commands executed flawlessly. Harper Hayes sat in the civilian section, her presence understated yet commanding. Marcus Hayes, in service dress blues, seated beside her, bore his trident and combat ribbons with quiet authority, each ribbon a shorthand for sacrifice and operational excellence. Even from 50 meters away, the presence conveyed weight. Rick's gaze flicked to them, taking in the lines of responsibility etched in their posture, the almost imperceptible tightening of Marcus' jaw, Harper's hands resting lightly in her lap, fingers flexing in small, controlled movements. When Rick's name was called, he walked forward differently and before. The swagger, the performative confidence, had been replaced by a controlled, even stride. Chin level, eyes forward, shoulders back but relaxed. Each micro-movement a slight flex in the fingers, a measured inhale through the nose, the brief press of lips into a line conveyed awareness and respect. He accepted his diploma, the weight of paper and promise in his hands. A fleeting tick of the left eyelid betrayed the surge of adrenaline, a remnant of self-conscious vigilance. After the ceremony, Rick approached Harper and Marcus. His posture remained measured, hands relaxed at his sides, voice even. "Commander Hayes, Miss Hayes, I failed to represent the values of this uniform before I earned the right to wear it. I'm sorry." The words carried sincerity, without embellishment, each syllable calibrated for clarity and accountability. Marcus extended his hand, his grip firm, unyielding, but not crushing, an emblem of trust offered yet conditional. "You've got a long road ahead, Seaman Chen. Don't waste it." There was no lecture, no indulgent pardon, just fact and expectation. Rick's hand met Marcus, knuckles whitening briefly as he returned the grip, a silent acknowledgement of both authority and responsibility. Harper gave a single nod, subtle yet weighty, a small motion acknowledging recognition without absolution. Her eyes, steady and precise, measured not just apology but intent. Rick exhaled quietly, shoulders loosening fractionally, micro-expression of relief fleeting, tempered by awareness that redemption was earned, not granted. As Rick moved toward his division, another recruit, naive and curious, asked, "Who were those people?" Rick's gaze flicked back, taking in Harper standing beside her brother, their posture radiating composed authority and silent vigilance, surrounded by invisible armor of experience and sacrifice. "Someone who taught me," he said carefully, voice quiet yet deliberate, "that strength isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who you protect." His words landed with gravity, unembellished yet weighted, a lesson internalized through observation and consequence. The division moved out across the field, boots scuffing in unison, shoulders aligned. Marcus placed his arm lightly around Harper's shoulders, a gesture of reassurance and shared understanding. "You okay?" he asked. "Always, Marcus." "That's what we do," she replied, voice steady, measured, yet carrying warmth beneath the discipline. A small, near imperceptible smile curved her lips. Besides, I think he might actually get it now. Together they walked toward the parking lot where 32 other SEALs waited by their vehicles, all off duty, all carrying the quiet authority of experience. Each man's presence reflected training, sacrifice, and cohesion. They had shown up for one of their own, silently conveying a fundamental truth: a warrior's worth isn't measured solely by the uniform they wear, but by the character they carry when no one is watching, the vigilance they maintain for those who cannot protect themselves. Harper's eyes scanned the formation, the glint of tridents, and subtle stance alignment confirming to her that Rick had been placed into a continuum of discipline, accountability, and operational integrity. The lesson was complete, though quiet and indelible. If you want to witness more stories of courage, discipline, and the quiet strength of those who serve, subscribe to our channel and join the journey.